So where did we leave off? We left. Oh, well, I don't know. We're talking about the the tribal natives of Big Turtle Island. We've got the different branch families, the Algonquian, the Siouan, the Iroquoian, but of course there are the Caddoan. The Caddoan peoples. A lot of the Caddoan peoples were from the Central Plains, I think. I believe the Kirkitish Wichita and the Hasinai Caddo, which is where the term Caddoan comes from. Then there's the Aztec Tanoan Kiowan group, the Gaigui Kiowa, obviously that. And then there's the Uto Aztecan people, who are also known as the Shoshonean branch family. The Shoshone are obviously that. And so are the Utes and the Paiutes. And all the native tribal native peoples of Big Turtle Island, and perhaps a lot of South America as well, are somehow come out of the influence of the Mesoamerican peoples, such as the Olmec to the Toltec to the Aztec, the Mayans, so on and so forth, and then probably the Incan peoples as well. That might be getting a little bit separate. Well, no, not necessarily. Probably that as well too. Um, because I know a lot of the when the Kishwa and the Aymara peoples would conquer different native tribes and assimilate them into their empire, the native peoples had no problems uh, uh, adapting the Incan beliefs into their own native religion. Then the Incan peoples and the Incan emperors and the empire had no problems with the native people keeping their own native beliefs alongside. This is why when the Spaniards came in, and they learned a little bit Christian ways, the Incan and all the other tribes had no problems incorporating a new belief system with their already prescribed things. Of course, the Spaniards are total dicks, they're complete assholes. And for numerous reasons. Of course, the Spanish never actually really conquered the Incan Empire. They could never find them. They were always secluded away up in their hidden city of Machu Picchu, and where they were able to sustain their way of life all the way to the modern day. And in fact, the two official languages of Peru and Bolivia today are Quechua and Aymara. I mean, Spanish is too, obviously, alongside, but Quechua and Aymara. And there are regions of Peru and Bolivia up in the Andes where they only speak Quechua, or they only speak Aymara. And the religion still proceeds to this day. There's still Incan shamans, and so yes. Anyway, back to the Aztec and the Mayan and the Mesoamerican peoples. All the tribes of Big Turtle Island are in some way, directly or indirectly, come out of the influence of those civilizations. Um, they somehow come out of that, except for the Northwest Coast tribes and the Kalalit of Kalalit Nunaat, the Inuit of Nunavut, and the Yupik and the Inupiaks going up into Siberia on the other side of the land bridge. No, not land bridge, I'm sorry. There was no land bridge. It's a bit literal in every aspect, big giant turtle, exactly. So there's also the Shahopti and Penutian family. I can't remember all the tribes. The Nez Perce or the Nimipu people. Of course, the Nimipu call the Great Spirit Hunyawat. And then there's the Californian tribes. I don't think no, they, they're very unique and distinct people too. The Californian, the Northwest Coast, and the Eskimo peoples are the ones who are in no way influenced by the Mesoamerican peoples. All other tribes somehow came out of that structure, came out of that influence from the Mesoamerican peoples. Um, the Gaigui people, the Kiowa, they are actually an Aztec Tanoan people who started way up in the northwest, up in the Great Basin area. I don't know the exact region. Idaho may have been in that area. What else is up there? The Great Basin region, really. And they went on this long odyssey down to the southeast until they finally came to the Central Plains. And of course, when the horse came in, they became a horse people. Now, when the horse was, well, the thing about Big Turtle Island is that there was a type of Asiatic horse that used to live on Big Turtle Island long before the Ice Age, the last Ice Age. In fact, they were ancient ancestors of the zoo, the zoo. That's Japanese for elephant, the zoo. The mastodons, the great woolly mammoths, you know. And so there was a type of Asiatic horse, but those died out. Those died out. So if you want a big sort of island, a tribal native name that has elephant in it, I don't see why not, because elephants were native to Big Turtle Island, just like any other animal, right? So anyway, so um, so the Gaigui, the Kiowa, they, the horse died out. But the horse wasn't reintroduced until the Spaniards came, the bullshit asshole Spaniards, the most brutal of all the Wasichu white men, closely followed by the British, then the French. The French were actually the kindest, the most compassionate, understanding, actually. Which is ironic because when the French invaded North Africa, they slaughtered people left, left, right. But that's a whole other story for another day. But anyway, the Spanish reintroduced the horse in the 16th century. The Pueblo people, the Hopi, the Ashiwi, they call themselves the Ashiwi, but they're regulate the Zuni people. The Zuni people call themselves the Ashiwi. The Ashiwi Zuni and the Hopis, the Quiris, the Acoma, the San Ilfonso, the Tigüenos, all the Pueblo peoples. Um, they were the first ones to really get their hands on the reintroduction of the horse, and they really bred them in high numbers in the 1500s. And I remember there was a famous Pueblo leader called Pope, and the Spanish tried conquering the Pueblos like they conquered the Aztecs and people down there, of course. And Pope led a great rebellion and completely drove the Spaniards out. They didn't stand a chance against Pope and his Pueblo rebellion. Um, so he's like a great hero to the Pueblo to this day, what he did against the asshole Spaniards. But I believe when the Spaniards first arrived, first of all, the Aztec Empire was disintegrating, just like the Mississippian mound dwellers and the Cahokian mound dwellers and the Hopewell people, the Great Southern Mound. That civilization died out. The people went back to a simpler way of life, back to the true ways of the true faith and the true people and the true, um, like Apocalypto got the message right, they just got certain details in the historical inaccuracy wrong. But when the Spanish first encountered the Mayan people, they were living the old way of life in the jungle still, and all the cities were deserted. But the people, even to this day, the Mayan people still go to temples for certain rituals and ceremonies, and but they don't. They gave up that way. They saw the corruption of the system, and they were losing their way. Um, the legend goes that Quetzalcoatl, the great lawgiver, the feathered serpent Kukulkan, who in the Incan religion is called Viracocha. Of course, in the Viracocha doesn't really take on a feathered serpent form among the Incans. But anyway, his enemy, Quetzalcoatl's enemy, was Tezcatlipoca, the smoking mirror, the jaguar god. He was like the sun god. Of course, another aspect of Tezcatlipoca, or he was in league with, but he was Huitzilopochtli, who was the great war god. And those were the chief gods who demanded the human sacrifices. The flowery death, as it were. But Quetzalcoatl, he always defied Tezcatlipoca. He defied, and finally he sacrificed himself to the people. He says, "Is this what you really want? Is this what you really want?" Tezcatlipoca, then very well. So Tezcatlipoca has his way. He sacrifices Quetzalcoatl at the flowery death on the altar, and Tezcatlipoca arises and becomes a great feathered serpent. He goes a constellation in the sky, and and he goes far into the east, and he says, "I am going now, and I will return. But when I return, be warned, Tezcatlipoca, your reign of tyranny will be at an end, because the people now know and realize that there is something deeper than your idiocy." So when the Spanish first arrived, they thought Hernan Cortez in particular, and the Spanish in general, were prophecy of Quetzalcoatl returning, because these are feathered serpents, feathered like the hair on their chins, and they, like, and so the corrupt Aztec Empire was already on its way out. It was degenerating, just like all the other ones I already mentioned. And it was deteriorating. And so, but the black priests who ruled knew this, and they didn't want the old ways to end. They thought this really was Quetzalcoatl, so they captured Hernan Cortez, the bastard asshole as he was, and they brought him to the top of the temple of Tezcatlipoca, and they were going to rip out his heart. Of course, Hernan Cortez's asshole bastard men have to save him, unfortunately. But the Tlaxcalan were a predominant tribe who were leading a rebellion against the corrupt before and during when the Spanish first arrived. And the Tlaxcalan and other tribal rebels and other Aztec rebels, peasants, folk, and whatnot were. So when they saw Hernan Cortez, asshole as he was, and the Spanish, they thought it was Quetzalcoatl as well. And so they allied themselves with what they thought was the prophecy being fulfilled. Of course, they were wrong as well, and turns out the Spanish were just as, if not more, cruel, because the Spanish, the black priests and Montezuma, well, he was more or less a puppet. Montezuma was a puppet king pretty much, but the black priests who ruled, they may have killed a lot of people for the flowery death on the altars, but the Spanish, when they took over, they were not Quetzalcoatl at all, unfortunately. As much as they wanted that prophecy to come true, they became just as, if not more, cruel tyrant. And so, if you didn't convert to Christianity, they burnt you alive. If you didn't pay your taxes, you were burnt alive. If you didn't act the way you wanted to, you were burnt alive. And the Spanish probably burnt more people alive than even the black priest had flowery deaths. So, it's like, what would you rather do? Would you rather, if you had a would you rather be killed the flowery death and have your heart ripped out, or would you rather be burnt alive at the stake? I don't know. It's both absolutely horrible. Painful beyond belief. So anyway, so yes, the horses. The horses were bred when they first arrived, and the Pueblo really brought them in, bred them in an alarming number in the 1500s, late 1500s, and so into the 1600s. I don't know when exactly, and I know definitely by the 1650s, the Apache people became a great horse people by the 1650s, maybe even a little bit sooner. The Eastern Apache, the Western Apache. The Eastern Apache were plains people who lived in teepees more. The Western Apache had licky up there, but the Apache people, the Nade, it's interesting because the Apache and the Navajo were both Athabascan people, which means the Athabascan, the Apache and the Navajo, Athabascan, but they're a southwestern people. Don't the Athabascan people come from Alaska and the Yukon? Like the Kuskokwim and the Koyukon and the Anak and the Tanana, just to name a few, up there, the Gwich'in. Even to this day, Canada national holiday is Gwich'in Day in Canada, which celebrates the heritage of the Gwich'in people. up there in the Northwest Territory. So, but yes, their ancestors, they traveled even further southeast than the Aztec Kiowan people of the Kiowa Gaigui people did up in the Great Basin area. And so they came all the way down into the southwest long ago. And so the Diné, the Navajo, were one of the first peoples to become a horse people, and also bred sheep in alarming numbers fairly relatively early on, probably in the late 1500s or early 1600s. And out of the horses that the Pueblo became known for breeding quite alarmingly. And the Apaches were the first nomadic horse peoples, and then going into the 1600s, I believe in the 1680s, or maybe even more in the 1690s, 1680s, 1690s, into the beginnings of the 1700s. That's when the Chahiks, the Pawnee people, and the Omaha, the Osage, and the Lakota, the Oceti-Sakowin, the nation of the seven tribal fires of the Sioux Nation, they became plains people with the horse sometime at the very end of the 1600s and 1700s. A lot of the other tribes to become a plains people and adapt the horse were the Sisistas, the Cheyenne, and the close related peoples, the Invernaina, who are both Algonquian. Which reminds me, we know all the way back to the history of the Abenaki and Wabanaki peoples, the Wabanaki Confederacy people. They're Algonquian. Obviously, they're Algonquian. The most widest spread branch people. They have shamans, holy men. I don't know if they are prophets. I believe that all the ancient primal religions, maybe even ancient pagan religions of Europe or whatever, at one time, or still in the world today, they're divinely revealed religions with divinely revealed prophets. We just don't know of them necessarily, their names. We don't know their names necessarily, but they did have them. But anyway, I'm digressing again. So the Wabanaki people had lesser holy men, shamans, maybe they weren't prophets in the fullest sense at that point. I don't know, but it doesn't really matter. They're great holy men, and the holy men had vision. Well, I think one of them in particular had a vision. And this Wabanaki holy man, he had a dream that far to the west of the Wabanaki lands, up in the north, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, southern Quebec, Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont. He had a dream that there's a land where food grows on water. Food grows on water. And he told the people about this, and a good number of the Wabanaki people, who are Algonquian, said, we must go west and find this land where food grows on water. So a group of the Wabanakis, ancient Wabanakis, I also want to say that when the Norsemen first came into the mainland proper of Big Turtle Island, but they died out, you see, and I'll go into that a little bit in further detail a little bit later. But the ones who survived adapted into the Wabanaki ways. They say the Norsemen came as far south as New England, at least northern New England anyway, and they merged in with Abenakis, and they took up this intermarried. So anyway, this group of Wabanaki voyaged west until they came to where food grew on water, which was the Great Lakes, and Lake Superior in particular. This is where the Mondomin, the wild rice, grew, and they became harvesters of the Mondomin, the wild rice. But as they went on this odyssey to where food grew on water, some of them got lost along the way, or some of them diverged and split off from these Wabanaki peoples, and they became the Sisistas, the Cheyenne, and the Invernaina Arapaho, and they became the Akaina, Siksika, and Pikuni, the Piegan people, the Blackfoot peoples. These were all originally Wabanaki. Yes. But the ones who finally arrived at Lake Superior and the rest of the Great Lakes, they became the Anishinaabe. Even today, a lot of the Anishinaabeg words like Estiban. An Esteban is a raccoon, an Esteban. The Abenaki word for Esteban, raccoon, is Asban, for instance. That's just one example there. Some Abenaki or Wabanaki words for owls is called kokoke, at least in Vanawabskeg, Penobscot. Kokoke, owl. Well, the Anishinabeg word is something like kukuko, kukuko. I believe Wadsworth Longfellow ended up translating it as kukukoho. Kukukoho. But kukuko. Let's not go with Wadsworth. It's kukuko. Or the Penobscot word kokoke. So they became the Anishinaabe, but the Sisistas, they became a woodland Algonquian people of the Midwest woodlands. And then fairly early on, I think the Shawnee, you know how the Cohokian mound dwellers fell apart, but their way of life and everything, and they went back to living a more simpler way of life, and they became tribes like the Aliniwek or the Shawnee. The Shawnee ended up adapting the horse relatively early on, maybe a little bit before the Cheyenne and the Arapaho in the 1750s. But they were like living in a partial plains life and a partial woodland life, like bordering on the prairie, bordering on in Illinois. I believe all the way in the Ohio River Valley, the descendants of the Hopewell people, the Algonquian Shawnee people, also. Oh, those were the Sock and Fox. I'm sorry, the Sock and Fox adapted the horse relatively early on. But were like there were a lot of like semi-nomadic people who adapted the horse early on, like the Iowa Missouria, who are a Siouan people. Remember, I told you the Siouan are morally closely related to the Iroquoian and are no way connected to the Algonquian. Anyway, the Iowa Missouria adapted the horse. And they were like a partial semi-nomadic, like not fully on the plains, but like a little bit of both. And I know the Sock and Fox, the Meskwaki Asaki, and the Aliniwek of Illinois were very much like that. So they're living in wigwams, but they had horses. So yes, the Blackfoot, who call themselves, there are different branches of the Blackfoot. There's the Akaina, which is the chiefs. Then there's the what was it now? The Siksika. What if we call them? No, the Akaina. No, I forget. I think it's the Akaina, the chiefs, who are also known as the Blood, Blood, the Blood tribe. Right? They're also known as the Akaina or the chiefs. And then there's the Siksika, and I forget what that means exactly. Sik. And then there's the Pikuni, and the northern Pikuni. That's where the word Piegan comes from. And those are the three branches of the Blackfoots. These are all Wabanaki peoples, and they're all related to the Anishinaabe. So the Anishinaabe, the Ojibwe, and then there's branches. Later on, the certain branches of the Ojibwe Anishinaabe branch off and become Plains Anishinaabe, along with another Algonquian people, the Cree peoples. Now, the only reason they're called Cree is because it's just a distortion of the word Christian. A lot of them became Christian early on. Of course, this isn't always true, because a lot of the Cree, even to this day, still continue to uphold the old ways and the old religion. Just ask Cree actor Gordon Tusis. In fact, he's still keeping alive the Sweat Lodge and a lot of the Cree prayers, and which I'm glad to hear. But that's why they're called Cree. A lot of the Cree people call themselves something like the Yiniwek or the Yihiwak, or Yiniwek. Then there's, of course, the Eastern Quebec Cree, who call themselves the Dab EU. EU means people. Dab means the true people. Okay, so you take away the Dab, you just have people. But we are the true people. So all are peoples on this earth. There's the Moose people, the Sun people, the Star people, the plant people, the tree people. All are mighty men. All are men. Just like there's the Uzala in that Kurosawa film. So it's all are men. the boar people, the bison people, the bird people. But only human beings are the Dab people, the Dab EU. So the Dab EU are the Eastern Quebec Cree. And there's a lot of fascinating stories among, but they're obviously Algonquin too. I don't know if they're directly connected to the Anishinaabe with the Awabanaki people, with the whole Odyssey, the Tisistas, the Arapaho, Cheyenne, Arapaho, and the Blackfoots. But the thing about Blackfoot is the term, the modern English term referring to the ones who live in the village up north in Canada. The Blackfeet is what they are called in the U.S. south border. But anyway, so among the W, they have a lot of interesting stories. I'll tell one here real quick. There was a story. This W hunter, Eastern Quebec Cree hunter, was fishing on a lake in his canoe, and he was rowing his canoe on the lake, and he hears a knocking sound on the side of his canoe. And he looks over. There's nobody there. Hears it again. He looks over. Nobody's there. But he looks over the third time, and there in the water is this beautiful woman. Humanish looking, but not human. She looks almost ethereal. Beautiful. He calls out to her. He says, "You're beautiful. You're beautiful." He says, "Come with me. Come with me. I'll be your wife. Come with me. I'll be your wife." And she grabs onto him and pulls him down to the water. And down he goes. And meanwhile, his canoe floats up to the shore. And the boy's uncle is concerned. He hasn't been back from his fishing trip. And he's looking all over, and he sees the washed up canoe. It's like, my nephew, what happened to him? I don't know where he is. And so he goes to see the local W Eastern Quebec Cree shaman, and the shaman he says, "You're good." Oh yes, that's what it is. Well, I remember now. The uncle found next to the canoe washed up was his son's shirt. All that was left of his nephew. I'm sorry, nephew. All that was left of his nephew was his buckskin shirt. And so he takes the buckskin shirt and he takes it to the shaman. And the shaman looks at it and he does a certain chant. He says to the uncle, "Your grandson is no longer your nephew is no longer in this world." And "What do you mean? He's no longer in this world. He's alive. He's completely healthy and he's alive. He's not dead." "Oh no, he's far from dead. But he's no longer in this world. And let me tell you, he's very happy. Far happier than he probably was in this world." And this proves that there's other worlds. The shaman says he's with some sort of, not an elf proper perhaps, but something very similar to the elves proper, like a W water maiden nymph, So that was one story. I think that's all for today. I will see you later, and I don't know where my ramblings will take me next. Goodbye.